Okay, so 1 o'clock. Um, yeah, it's 1 o'clock. I'll do a little introduction and things like that, see if anyone pops on this. But if not, this gives me freedom to actually just chat a bunch of shit, which I'm happy to do, as always. Um, so the whole point of this live, really. Firstly, this is my first live. Um, oh, hi, Leslie. Um, This is my first live, so you'll have to excuse me on this one. Secondly, there's some building works outside, so hopefully everything sounds good and sounds okay. And finally, I'm also doing some dog walking at the moment, so I do have a dog in the room who's currently asleep. So be prepared for snoring if it happens, okay? So the whole point of this live is basically 5 things that really helped me with reactivity, with getting through it all. 5 ideas that just really helped me work with how I work with reactive dogs. At the start of everything, I didn't really know what I was doing, but I'm hoping these 5 ideas are things that you can take away, right? I always believe that one good idea repeated over a long enough time frame can genuinely change your life, right? One good idea can make your life 10 times better. One bad idea repeated can make your life 10 times worse. So these are just 5 ideas that I really believe could make things a lot better for you. And then after that, we'll hit up the Q&A if there's any questions. Um, just anything on reactivity, basically. And yeah, we'll end it there. So let's get started. So, my first idea is regulation before expectation. And this is something I talk about a lot when it comes to not just reactivity, but when it comes to dogs in general. Regulation has become like a philosophy for paws of wisdom and kind of like a philosophy for how I live my life. Regulation means just making sure everything is functioning properly, right? So this means no stress, no frustration when it comes to our dogs, like no overstimulation. We try not to stress out the system before we can expect things. And it might sound better if I state this in a way that, like, I feel we've all had those weeks where we go to work, we're not feeling ourselves, we have things going on at home, or we're just not in the right mental space. And some reason that week at work ends up being the week where we're expected to do things, right? Where we're expected to reach certain targets, where we're expected to sell to X amount of people, where we're expected to manage people. And when you're really not with it, when the ball's just not rolling in your court, you're off your game. And the same thing is for our dogs as well. When they're not regulated, when they're overstimulated, when they're stressed, when they're frustrated, when that internal system just doesn't function how it should be functioning, we can't really expect much from them. And the main reason is because without regulation, when a dog is dysregulated, they're they find it harder to listen. They don't really follow instructions. They make impulsive decisions. Their body tends to be the thing that makes the decisions instead of their mind. And this is why regulation before expectation is such a big deal for me. And it's probably the best idea out of all of these 5 ideas, because we need to make sure that our dogs are functioning properly before we can expect things from them. Because when we try to fix behaviors, issues, reactivity, when we try all of this outside, when our dogs aren't regulated, that's when things start to fall apart. That's when they end up rehearsing the behaviors that we don't want them to rehearse, not because that's what they want to do, it's because they don't really have a choice in that. So that's the first idea that I'm sharing out here, right? So before asking dogs to like walk nicely, to engage with us, to ignore other dogs, we want to make sure that their system can actually cope with what we're asking for. And the best way to build regulation is just by meeting your dog's needs. I think a lot of people think that it's quite hard to get what you're asking for, but all you really need for success is to meet your dog's needs to start with, right? That gives you such a level baseline that you can just build everything else upon. And meeting needs is not as hard as it sounds, but I think we all end up overcomplicating it. We take our dogs for these big walks where they just constantly rehearse chaos. We give them all these little boredom busters to do during the day. Although I do enjoy boredom busters, but I feel like a lot of people rely a lot on boredom busters. Um, but we try doing more and more and more, but meeting their needs is quite a simple thing. Um, it's giving them some sort of physical outlet. So, an actual physical outlet, not just going for a walk, because a lot of dysregulated dogs, they just don't benefit from going for a walk. So, in my idea, in I believe, sorry, that we need to find better outlets for our dogs, right? You don't need to walk your dog a lot more. You need to find them a proper outlet. And then things like mental stimulation and sleep. These are the three factors that if you nail, you'll be able to build a regulated dog. And just those three alone will reset your baseline. And from there, you can build the right foundations and the skills on top. So the next thing I want to talk about is the rehearsal of chaos, basically. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, ideas are powerful, right? You can consistently do an idea for a period of time and it can make your life better or worse. And the same thing goes with the rehearsal of behaviors or habits, right? You rehearse the same thing over and over again and it becomes stronger and stronger. For some people, you can have like a good habit, right? You can be someone who saves money all the time and over a long period of time, right, you can end up pushing yourself to like financial wellness, financial freedom, and things like that. But if you're someone who spends more money than they earn, which I was for a while, then you end up repeating those behaviors. And no matter how hard you try, it can be so hard to stop. And there's a there's a law in neuroscience called Hebb's law, which is neurons that fire together wire together, which means the more and more you do something, the more ingrained it becomes, the more automatic it becomes. And the same thing goes with reactivity. The more our dogs rehearse chaos, the more they rehearse um, reactivity, the more they stay in those states of over arousal and overstimulation, the more and more that happens, the harder it is for them to actually break themselves out from it. And it stops becoming, it becomes an automatic sort of behavior. It stops it stops being something that they have to think about and it just ends up being something that happens. They end up losing control. And this is where the body becomes the mind. And you might have experienced it where your dog starts off not as reactive, right? but they start rehearsing the behaviors, and before you know it, they can hear like the jingle of a collar, and straight away, as soon as they hear that jingle, their ears perk up, they start becoming vigilant. And this is because they've rehearsed the behavior so much that they don't even have to think about it. They hear something and it triggers them because they're so routinely, they're so into that routine, right? They know what's coming. It's predictable. So we need to stop them from rehearsing that behavior. I see Leslie putting yes in there. Like, yeah, 100%. Reactivity. I understand that there's a lot of emotion behind reactivity, whether it be fear, whether it be anxiety, whatever has started reactivity. But on a long enough time scale, the rehearsal of the behavior creates this conditioning where it's just so easy for them to do. And the easier it is for them to do, the harder it is for us to break them out of. Um, so yeah, we need to stop the rehearsal of these behaviors. And there's a lot of different ways you can do that. Um, I mean, you can take them out of the environment that they're having those behaviors. I do like a detox with dogs that I work with where I take them off from walks and we focus on basically resetting the baseline and things like that. But the whole point is we stop the rehearsal of said behaviors. And by stopping the rehearsal of those behaviors, we allow the mind to come back into the equation and we can start teaching them what we want them to do. And then we can take them back out into these environments and start testing them to see if they can cope with it. Um, so yeah, step one for all of this is just making sure that we can interrupt the pattern. Because once we interrupt the pattern, once we can show them that there's another way to go about life, it starts becoming quite an easy journey to deal with. And I'm gonna say easy, but it's not easy is more relative to the term, sorry, but like I say easy because a lot of people who I end up working with are really struggling and they're exhausted with with something such as simple as walks, right? It drains them. And I'm not saying that all you have to do is stop the reactivity and interrupt your dog's reactive behavior through stopping walks and then everything's fine. But the journey is a lot easier once you teach them an alternate way of living. As soon as you can start programming that idea into their heads that they don't have to react, that there's other things that they can do, everything starts to click and make sense for them. And this kind of brings me on to the next idea, which is control the controllables. I know um, having a reactive dog is tough because the environment doesn't work for us, right? You have off leash dogs, you have people who will literally shove their hands into your dog's face to say hi, whether they like it or not. You have cyclists who you might not see, you have cars, skateboards. There is so much environmental chaos that we just can't control. And one of the things that really, for me, one of the things was like, I blamed a lot of things on things that I can control, right? Off leash dogs. I blamed I was used to live in a high skateboard area, and that was something which set my dog off a lot as well. And the thing with this is we can't control the uncontrollables as much as we really want to. But if we can't control it, we need to stop blaming it because it puts so much pressure on us, and it starts to create this mindset in us that things aren't going our way because of these uncontrollable things. So these things are always going to exist, right? If it's not an off leash dog, it's you turning around a corner and for some reason there's a dog right there, right? No matter how hard you try to control the uncontrollables, you just can't, right? It's like trying to change the weather. It's like trying to change the seasons. The things that we can change are ourselves, how we react to things, and also our dogs and how they react to things. That's basically all that we can control. So those should be the only things that we focus on controlling, that we focus on worrying about. Um, Instead of asking, why does this keep happening to me? It's better to ask, what did this situation teach me instead, right? What can I do differently to get success in that situation? So if it's an off leash dog, what can you do to make that situation better next time? Right? Is it the environment that you're in? Right? Is it just an off leash dog area? Is it the skills and foundations? Is that something that you need to work on? Or is it simply just how you react to things as well? There's so many different points that you can assess that will help you for next time. Because at the end of the day, that's all that we can control, right? How we deal with things and how our dogs deal with things. Maybe our dogs aren't ready for that environment. Maybe they need more training. Maybe it's absolutely fine. And it's just an off leash dog that decided to get into our face. And if that's the case, then we just need to shake it off, right? Setbacks happen. Life just is not easy. And as I said, these are uncontrollable things. They will always happen. So if it's just a setback, if it's just a small reaction from an off-leash dog, or a bike goes past you, or a skateboard goes past you that you missed, then shake it off, right? It's like one of my favorite things to say, but like dogs completely shake off any stress and they go back to living their best life. And we should be more dog in that sense. We should shake off that stress and go back and enjoy the walk. Don't let it knock you down for longer than it really should do. Okay. And then the next idea that I want to bring about is not to teach your skills on the walk. Skills have to be built at home. I think for a lot of dysregulated dogs, building skills outside in the real world is tough. It really is. Because when dysregulated dogs are on walks, they're more focused on their environment. They're not focused on us. And you've got to think of like a speedometer where if when the needle is to the left, it's when your dog is focused on you, right? And when the needle is to the right, it's when the dog is focused on the environment. When a dog is more focused on the environment than you, anything that you try teaching them, they're not going to learn because they're more focused on the environment. They're more worried about what's coming around the corner. As I mentioned earlier, if they hear a dog's collar jingle, they'll straight away zone out and they'll be like, where is that coming from? Teaching skills in these areas is so hard for people to do. And one of the big things with people that I'm helping, like walking dogs with at the moment, one of the things that they struggle with is the walk itself. And when I ask them like what you've tried with the walk, they're like, "Oh, we've tried stopping and starting, we've tried doing this, we've tried doing that," and everything is on the walk. And as I've mentioned, it's a lot harder to fix these problems on the walk. If you want to build the skills, such as a loose leash walk, such as engagement, um, redirecting back at you, redirecting that attention, obviously not redirecting the bites. Um, you need to teach these at home, right? You need to gradually improve, gradually increase, like testing the behaviors. So you teach everything at home, then you take it to a green zone, and then you slowly start building it up from there, right? Can they do this in the back garden? Can they now do this in the front? Can they now do this around the block? We have to build things up gradually. Um, Once again, it falls under regulation for expectation. We need to stop the chaotic learning, build things up gradually, because it's like studying for a test, right? Let's say you study for a grade 1 test, and then you sit a grade 5 test. You're more than likely going to fail said test because it's not what you've studied for at all. By gradually increasing our expectations, right? We build the skills at home, then we test it into these little areas, and we build up and we build up and we build up. We build a more reliable dog because they understand what we're asking from them, but also it builds up our confidence, mostly because we know our dog knows what we're expecting of them. I think one of the biggest things that knocks people's confidence is that they don't feel like they can trust their dog in certain areas or situations. And a big reason of this is because the dog hasn't shown that they can do the thing that they need in these areas or situations. But if you gradually improve and increase like the criteria of what you're expecting of your dog in certain spaces, once you know that they can do what you're asking in these zones and you move on to the next zone, it starts to build confidence in both of you. And once you have that confidence, you both become more resilient because you have that confidence. You know your dog can start doing these things. And in my opinion, once you start building resilience, once you start building that confidence, things start to become so much smoother, right? You can hit setbacks and it's like water on a duck's back. Once you have these, once you have that confidence, once you have that resilience, once you know your dog has those skills, everything from there just starts becoming such a battle, basically. And this pulls us into the final idea, which basically is kind of on the same forefront as this, which is gradual exposure wins. So, as I mentioned in the last idea, right, we need to build skills at home. Those skills are so important when we go out. Um, and I think one of the biggest things to understand is that when your dog, as I mentioned with that speedometer, when your dog is more focused on you and in work mode, as I call it, they're less likely to react. You might have seen this when you're playing with your dog, or you're doing something interactive with your dog, and um, and they completely ignore another dog that's crossing the street because they're so locked into what you're doing and this game that there's no point reacting. They are literally locked in, as the term states. And that's kind of what you want to be building. You want to be building those skills and foundations that you can take outside, that then when you do see a dog, you can call on these skills, on these foundations, so that it's not a big issue for them to react. So one of the things that I really like is a game of tug, right? If you can start a game of tug with your dog, with another dog in the background somewhere, I promise that if you do it right and you build up to that point, they're going to be less focused on that dog and more focused on that game. And it's not the fact that they didn't notice that trigger, because they 100% have, right? As I mentioned, dogs hear the jingle of a collar and go on edge, right? They definitely know a dog is there, but they're just not bothered about it at all. That's the kind of engagement that you want to build up with your dog. Um, I haven't tried that and kid do it in the front yard. Yeah, 100%. Like this. So for me, I think it's quite a really good concept to really think about, because it is in a way conditioning your dog not to react. It's the teaching of an alternative behavior without having them focus on another dog. I think one big struggle point is when people do like watch me games or what's that games or look at that games. And I have no issues with those, but I think some people end up doing them in a way that the dog is more locked in on that dog, and they have to focus on that dog until that dog disappears. And that's not really what I think a lot of people want. I think what people really want is they want neutrality, right? By playing with our dogs and for them to notice something in the background and come back to play, I think that is more so what people want, right? A dog that notices what's going on in the back, realizes it's what I've come to call not your business, right? That trigger, that distraction is not your business. Come back here, right? But if you're locked into this game, they have no issue with what's going on around them. Obviously, you have to take things slowly. You don't go straight into the middle of a dog park and start playing tug. But like as Leslie said, like doing it in the front yard, 100%, right? And whether your dog is reactive to other dogs or people or anything like that, doing it in your front yard will build resilience in itself, right? Because there's always going to be distractions, right? There'll be people walking past, there'll be birds, animals, cars, people going into their homes, out of their homes, all of this stuff. If that's the case and your dog notices these things and can switch back to you, that's going to make things so much easier. That starts building that re-engagement with you. Um, so re-engagement is what you want. That's such a big skill for, because when a dog is engaged with with their environment, with their trigger, you want them to re-engage with you, right? And to do that, you need to build engagement, re-engagement, and that's you can do that through tug or any other games, basically. Um, Leslie, so the tug game doesn't make the dog take out their aggression on the rope as if tugging with the other dog. No, 100% not. So tug is, for me, I really like tug. And I think it's a great game for a lot of dogs, because it takes out this sort of, there is a drive in it, but I think a lot of dogs really see it more as play than aggressive behavior. Um, Obviously, I'm trying to be careful with how I word this. To be fair, um, it do, so you've got things like bite work, obviously, and if you've seen dogs that go through bite work, obviously some of them are protection dogs, like that's what they're bred to do and things like that. But a lot of other dogs that go to like bite work classes and things, um, they're just regular dogs that enjoy that sort of outlet. And I think we have to think about it more as an outlet, because those dogs really do. I've seen sausage dogs doing bite work because that's what they absolutely love. They love the whole tugging. They love that game factor of everything. And yeah, tug is. I don't think tug is an aggression based game. I think it's more like what I'd call a conflict game, right? It's your dog's opportunity to kind of fight with you. Because in every single game, there is a winner and there is a loser. And that's what tug is about. Um, Obviously, sometimes we win, sometimes we let our dogs win. But that conflict that's created in the middle, that's for some dogs, especially like bull breed dogs, they love that conflict, right? They live for that conflict. So games like tug for bull breeds are absolutely great. Um, Games like tug and like spring poles and things like that, they're absolutely great for when it comes to um, for outlets. My puppy loves it. Yeah, 100%, 100%. Um, Tug is, in my opinion, tug is probably one of the best things that you can do with a lot of dogs. It's just fun, it's easy to do, and you do it right, it can properly drain their energy, and it's fulfilling at the end of the day. And they get to bond with you as well. I think Tug is one of those games that ticks every single box on things that you want, of what you want an outlet to be. Um, but yeah, those are my 5 ideas that have really changed how I work with reactivity. And hopefully, one of these ideas can be something that helps you. Um, as I mentioned, one idea repeated over a period of time can drastically change the direction of where you're going. So I'm hoping that at least one of these will be able to help you in the direction that you want to go. If you do need a lot of extra help, or if you do need structure on where to start, I do have a 12-week program, which is just about launching now. I'll pop the link for that in the description or in the comments of this video for the replays. But it's just a 12-week program to get your dog from reactive or dysregulated to basically where we want them to be a regulated and reliable companion. So if that is of interest to you, just keep an eye out. I'll pop that into the links below. And then I think we've got some time for Q&As. So Leslie, if you have any questions at all, you can pop them into the chat. Can you recap the 5? Yeah. Yeah, okay. So I'll do a recap on the 5th one, which was gradual exposure wins. Um, so the gradual exposure wins is, as I was saying, it's basically progression. You want to gradually expose your dog to the things that they react to, but very slowly. I think in the 4th one, I mentioned that like if you take a grade 1 test, if you study for a grade 1 paper, you want to take a grade 1 test. You don't want to take a grade 5 test. So you take a grade 1 test. So this means you build up the skills that you need at home, and then you slowly test them outside. So can your dog do said thing in the back garden? Um, and you let your dog do said thing in the front around distractions, the more and more um, you basically want to go from home training into difficult environments, but taking your time to work up the ladder. So you go from home, then you go into what I call green zones. These are zones that have minimal to no distractions. Think of things like car parks, industrial estates, if you have any near, um, even just like the front of the house, just basically easy environments that you know your dog can have success in. And basically, in these environments, you're calling on things like your engagement work, you're calling on things like, um, as I mentioned, tug, right? Tug is a play in itself is such a great way to keep your dog engaged with you. Um, so calling on things like engagement, calling on things like play, tug, doing these in these easy areas builds your confidence and it builds your dog's confidence. And you basically strengthen these green zones. And once you strengthen a green zone, you move on to the next green zone. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to build enough confidence and resilience in your dog that they understand they understand the assignment, as people say. And then once they understand the assignment, once they understand that they can engage with you, they can play with you, they can do all of this stuff outside when it's asked for and it's rewarding, it's fun, it's safe, then you can start moving to your yellow zones. And your yellow zones might be like a slightly busier car park. It might be um, outside a dog park. That's a great area to do a lot of exposure work. But the only issue is obviously some people like to have their dogs off leash as soon as they get to the dog park. So outside the dog park can sometimes be an issue, but like it's always good to check. Um, Other places it can include things like a quiet cafe, right? Taking your dog to a quiet cafe, depending on the time, obviously not at peak times. Um, that could be a yellow zone, and you're just basically starting to stack up um, these gradual exposure wins. I'm seeing if I've got anything else on that one, but yeah, what you're doing in these zones is you're generalizing and you're proofing the behaviors. You're generalizing and proofing what you want them to do. Once you build generalization and proofing, once you show them there is another thing that we can do, like there's another way, you don't have to react at these dogs. There's another way that we can live. Once you show them that in different pictures, they start to generalize it. You're trying to paint as many different pictures as you can. Um, so your dog doesn't keep reacting in the way that you don't want them to, right? We show them, okay, the behaviors that we built at home, we can do those outside in the back garden, we can do those in the front. We can call on those in this car park here when there's a few people walking past. And before you know it, you'll be able to call on them when you're taking your dog for a big hike or a big adventure or something like that. There's a lot of different skills that you can build up. Um, Obviously, there's tug engagement. You can do place training. There's a lot of different things um, that you can call on here. And Leslie, I've been told to not let my dog win at tug because of dominance, but I like your understanding a lot more as a bonding experience. I think that's I think that's quite an old way to look at things. The whole dominance winning at tug sort of thing. I heard that before as well. Um, but letting your dog win, I think it not only creates that bonding experience, but I think it makes the game a lot more fun for them. Because they know that they can win this game. They know that there's chances for them to win the game. when you can't win a game, it gets frustrating, and after a while, you do get tired of the game. And knowing that you have a chance of winning can keep you going, right? It gives you that dopamine that keeps you going. I like to refer to dogs as dopamine addicts, right? If there's the slightest chance of something happening, they like to gamble it. And that goes for Tug, and it makes it so much more rewarding for them um, when they do win, because it's something that they can win at. And I suppose it kind of builds that, it helps with optimism with dogs, right? They know that they can win this game. And with games, the things that dogs learn in games transfer outside of games easily because, in my opinion, life is just one big game for dogs. It really is. Um, but the skills that they learn in games, they take outside of games. If they know that they can win in a game of tug, right, they can take that outside and they can be more optimistic about life. Um, I think for people who do worry about things like dominance and aggression being a factor that could potentially crop up, you also have you can also create rules around the game. So obviously, with staying on the topic of tug, with tug, you can start the game, you can stop the game, right? If you can do those two things, then I don't think you need to worry about things like aggression popping up. Obviously, make sure you're not getting your dog proper over threshold, but that's why you have the stop game function, right? So you can get them to stop, you get them to take a breather, and then you can restart the game when you want to restart the game. Question: what if the dog doesn't take the tugging when distracted? So, if the dog doesn't take the tug when distracted, there could be a few reasons why. So, depending on where you are, it could be the environment. So, it could be that the environment is already too distracting, but it could also be that they've spotted the distraction first. You want to get them playing with you before a distraction arises. So, that distraction is like in the back of the head, right? They're already locked into the game with you, right? That when they do hear or see or notice a distraction, that they're already locked into the game. They're not bothered about that distraction. Um, so it could also be the distance from the distraction. As I mentioned, we want gradual exposure wins. If you're playing tug and you have an off leash dog run straight up into the area, that could obviously create a lot of issues. But like, if you're far enough for a distraction to start a game of tug, it's kind of like the whole thing with dogs taking treats outside as well, right? A lot of dogs struggle to take food and treats in the presence of a distraction because they're too worried about the distraction. If you think about it, like let's say you're with your friend and you're going to your car after having a nice meal somewhere, and it's a bit of a sketchy neighborhood. It's dark out, and you get these two people that approach you, um, and yeah, let's say they have knives. Now, the simple thing is obviously to open the car door and to get in and drive away. But in that moment in time, you'll be fumbling with your keys, you'll be panicking, you won't be able to do something as simple as unlock the door. And I guarantee if your friend asked you, do you want to play a game of tug or do you want to do something like that? You'd think it's a ridiculous question. You'd be like, of course I can't. Can you not see what's going on? And that's kind of the whole vibe with the gradual exposure. You want your dog to be engaged with you and be able to cope in the environment. So when things do happen, when these people do come and approach in the dark, you can easily put the key into the car and get out of there. Um, Great analogy. Thank you. Thank you. Um, but I think that's realistically it. I think the whole thing that we want is we want to increase our dog's threshold, um, because it's something that we can do. We can increase our dog's threshold over time, and we can get them to cope in different environments. I really believe that the majority of dogs, if not all of them, can be turned into reliable companions, right? Obviously, some might take a lot more work than others, but I really do believe that we can get our dogs to be we can get our dogs to be reliable. We really can. And it just takes a bit of work. And I think we just have to be willing to do the boring work. That basically builds on top of the foundation that your foundation builds on top of, sorry. Things like gradual exposure, it's not the most fun thing. It really isn't. And I 100% understand that. Right. We all want to be at a point where we have freedom with our dogs. Like, I think that's the be all and end all goal for a lot of people. Well, reactive dog owners especially. We want our dogs to have freedom. We want them to be reliable. We want them to be able to be off leash and be able to recall back. We want them to just be to have that freedom. But to have that freedom, we need to be able to do the boring stuff. We need to be able to build those foundations before they have that freedom. Um, and another analogy, which is actually one that I used the other day, is that a lot of dogs that do get that off leash freedom, um, they don't really know what to do with it. And they end up being the dogs that really need a lot of work. So it's kind of like those people that win the lottery and they end up spending all of that money. I think I don't know the percentage or anything like that of like people who win the lottery and how many have like who spend everything. But like that's the whole thing with freedom. Those people haven't built like the basic money habits that would allow them to like, oh, okay, I can put some money aside, I can invest in this, I can do this, I can do this, and things that would help them grow that financial sort of barrier. Instead, they have a load of bad habits and they end up spending everything, and then they end up back at square one. And for me, that's what freedom is. Freedom is learning and building those foundations, those habits, those boundaries, that structure. It's instilling all of that to start with. So we can then go on and have that freedom. Because once we have, once we do all that boring work, we build reliability. And when we have that reliability, we can then push for freedom, right? Because we're not afraid of what our dogs do. Um, yeah, because we have that reliability. We're less worried about what they're going to do. Yes, I've seen a big change in the last year and still have more boring stuff to practice. Yeah, this is it. This is it. Um, the boring stuff is the main stuff. It really is. Um, and unfortunately, we can't say how long the boring stuff really lasts. Um, I know I was doing the boring stuff with my old dog Jasper for ages. Like when we had to reset everything, we were doing the boring stuff. We were doing place training. We were doing um, the boring walks and gradual exposure and things like that. And it's not fun. It really isn't. But the change that you see is huge. Um, I think that's where a lot of owners really struggle, is because they just don't put enough work in the boring stuff. They build these shaky foundations, and it's kind of like, if you consider it as like a machine, right? The the when your foundation isn't running properly, when you have built a weak foundation, all it takes is for someone to throw like a bit of sand in the machine, like chaos, right? Once it starts to seep through the cracks, that's when the foundation gets tested. And if you've built a really weak foundation, those cracks start to break open even more until, well, until things happen that we don't want to happen. And you can end up back at square one, or even worse, you can end up in a way worse position. The goal really is to build a strong foundation. And I think that's something that's not really, it, it's something that's kind of overlooked. I think the concept of things like regulation and things like building strong foundations and gradual building up of things, I think it's skipped out a lot. Um, it's really nice to have other people see how much the dog has evolved if they haven't seen them in a while. Then you really can feel proud of all the work you have put in has been successful. 100%. 100%. I think that, so that is probably one of the nicest feelings, right? When someone sees your dog, they haven't seen them for a while, and they're like, is this the same dog? Like, what have you been doing? And I think that's the importance of the foundations. That's the importance of the boring stuff. That's really the secret to success. Um, I think yeah, as I've said, I think a lot of this is overlooked because we always see trainers on Instagram. We always see the quick transformations. We don't see the work that really goes behind some things. And I also don't believe we see the work that people have to maintain either. Um, Even when people see these quick wins that happens on social media, that dog is not then fixed, as to say, that owner still has to do the work. They still have to maintain that dog just to keep them like that. And dogs are what I call an endless game, which is something I talked about today. Right, having a dog is an endless game. There is no A to B, it's A to Z, and then you take these checkpoints in the middle. Sometimes you end up back at A. It's back and forth. You've got to make sure that you build the foundations and the resiliency for it. Um, it's hard to see it for yourself sometimes. 100%. I think noticing changes is such a hard thing, when it's us trying to see these changes. This is why journaling and tracking progress is one of my favorite things to do. But also, like, if you really do think about it, I can't remember what it's called, or how it's stated, but I think when people go to the gym, or start taking up exercise, I think it takes a few weeks for like, other people to notice the changes, and then it takes you a lot longer. I think it's like a month or a couple of months to actually notice the changes that are actually happening for you. And I think the same thing goes for our dogs. It's so hard for us to see the actual changes. It's so hard for us to notice how far we've come. Um, like simple things you 100% overlook sometimes your dog making a right choice. Sometimes you overlook your dog being able to settle down quicker, than they usually would. it's really hard to notice these small changes in our dogs. But on the other hand, it's so nice to see when it does happen. And it's even nicer when people can also see it as well, because it lets you know that you're on the right track. And I think that's it. Like, if you can make sure you're on the right track and moving in the right direction, that's all that really matters. Um, and as I've mentioned, like that's the whole point of having good ideas, right? The more and more you rehearse the right ideas, the more you move in the right direction, the more progress you can see. And that's really what you want to be doing. You want to be moving in the right direction. You want to be setting your sail, no matter how boring the work is, no matter how tedious it might feel. I think the big payoff comes a lot later than we think. Um, as they say, you reap what you sow. And if you put the work in now, the payoff that you have down the line is going to be incredible. It really will. It really will be. And it's so much more rewarding at the end of it all as well, I believe. Um, I think people who give their dogs freedom straight off the bat, those who end up with dogs that struggle, right? So they give their dogs freedom right at the start, and then further down the line, that dog ends up having to be a dog that they have to micromanage more and work with behavior wise. I think dogs in that position are a lot, their quality of life kind of goes down because, like, that end part, not the end part of their life, but that later part of their life, I think should be more about freedom. And it's kind of like the same thing for us. We kind of want our lives to be, we do all of this work, right? We go to school, we go to college, we do whatever, we get a job, and then we want to be able to retire and enjoy our lives. And I think that's the way we really do need to look at it with our dogs. I don't think it's a case of structures and boundaries and all of this are punishment. I think it's more so that we're teaching our dogs what we want from them so they can further enjoy their life when they've earned that freedom. Because it's so much easier once we know they're reliable and they've earned that freedom, we don't have to worry about it anymore. But yeah, I feel like I rambled on that point a little bit. Um, but yeah, any other questions? If not, we can wrap up there. But I really hope this has been a relatively not eye opening, but I hope there's been some good ideas that have come through here that you can take away, even if it's just like one idea, right? As I said, one idea can change the whole course of your life. It really can. So I'm hoping that at least one of these ideas would really help. This will be a more regular thing. I'm not sure what times I'll be doing them at, probably around the same time. Um, but it will definitely be on Saturdays and potentially Wednesdays as well, depending how things go. But it was wonderful and can't wait to learn more. Thank you, Leslie. Yeah, this honestly, I think this is a nice little segment. I think it's nice talking about. Um, I think it's nice getting to talk about dogs and answer some questions. I really have enjoyed this live as well. I'm getting out the tug toy now, 100%, 100%. Like it's such. I can't explain about how much I genuinely do love the game of tug. It's such a bonding experience. It's such a great way to condition your dog and desensitize your dog, right? Taking them to different environments, and doing tug. I used to do a lot of tug and obedience work, like a structured game of tug where we take breaks and do obedience with my previous dog Jasper, and we used to do it outside like the university, and in all of these really not insanely busy areas, but we do these activities in these areas with like other people, and it was such a fun experience. It really was, and him engaging with me more than the people around. It's honestly one of the greatest feelings. Um, but yeah, definitely get that tug toy out, and 100% enjoy. But that's it for this live. It's all been I hope it's all been great. And as I've said, we'll schedule another one for next Saturday, 100%. I'm not sure if I'll get another one in on Wednesday yet, but I hope this has been a really good experience for you all. Um, it keeps me on my toes to not get my hand chopped off. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's always a what would you call it? A risk, especially with bull breeds. I think they get really into a game of tug. Um, I used to have the ones with the handles on the side. Um, they're quite fun to have as well, to be fair. Um, but yeah, if anyone has any questions or anything like that, feel free to contact me. Um, as I've said, I'll drop the link for the regulated and reliable dog program. And if you're interested, you can book a call with me for that. And yeah, that's about it. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your Saturdays. Thank you.